Okay, seeing that it's 7 o'clock, I'm going to open the hearing of January 13th, 2021 regarding the 40B Country Club Estates project. In attendance for the board members are Kasai Nazrella, Gerald Joy, Bob Durgan, Pete Posselin, Dan Basari, myself, and we have the town administrator, Charlie Seelig, and the chairman of the planning board and co-chair of the Board of Health, Mr. Diaz. Good evening, everyone. How are we doing?
Good.
All right. Well, let's kick this off. This is how and town council's there, Amy Questle. She's on board. I don't see her, but you said she was. Okay.
She's right.
All right.
My screen.
Oh, hi, Paul. How are you? All right. Let's, seeing that we got the traffic study, that was what we were discussing on our last meeting. Let's start off with the traffic study. Mr. Posselin did have several questions and concerns regarding the entranceway, the lineup, the traffic, the signals, and I did receive a copy. I hope everybody also received a copy of the updated traffic study by, who is it, Paul?
Green International, Bill Scully.
Yes, it is. Green International. That's the one. Is Mr. Scully there? Is he with us?
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, happy and safe New Year to everyone. There, as it indicated at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the lineup of the entrance to the driveway as it into the signalized intersection. And I know that Bill Scully and the town's traffic engineer through Pat Brennan's office have had a lot of conversations, and I think they're in agreement as to what the way it should be done. So I'll let Bill kind of take over and explain sort of in layman's terms what needs to be done and what they're in agreement with, and take it from there, Bill.
All right, Mr. Brennan, are you with us, Pat?
Let me get him. Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Pat. How you doing? Bert Gaynor here. Pat, did you receive the letter from Mr. Scully there and have a chance to? I did see your email. I know you had a chance to review all of it. Were there any, as you had said in your letter, there were several issues that were discussed and agreed upon. Would you care to touch on them, and then we can clarify with Mr. Scully?
Yeah, well, we had Gill and Associates as a subcontractor for us review it. He's a traffic professional. I thought he was going to be on the logged in tonight, but I don't see him. But I can. It's fairly simple to review what Jack Gillen's recommendation was, and basically what the issue is that the driveway from Country Club Estates, it's opposite the Stop and Shop driveway. However, they don't line, the center lines of the two driveways are offset by about 10 to 12 feet. So they don't line up perfectly across from one another. Mr. Gillen's recommendation was to stagger the timing on those two approaches. So what that means is that the green light for the people coming out of the Stop and Shop driveway would not be at the same time as the green light for the people coming out of the Country Club Estates project. So they would have different signal time, so that you did not so that they did not have vehicles exiting at the same time and have a possible conflict, since the driveways aren't lined up center. The center lines aren't lined up. In Mr. Scully's letter, he acknowledged that, and they have, I believe, and Mr. Scully can obviously speak to this better than I can, but I believe they've committed to investigating that timing and doing the timing such that those two approaches are different, that they're not at the same time. With that said, when they did their analysis on that, by having the staggered timing on those two approaches, it really didn't have any adverse impact on that on the operation of that intersection, nor the other two intersections, the other two nearby signalized intersections. So it still works, and basically what Mr. Gillen said is that the applicant should be responsible for the design and construction of the modifications to the signal, which they would have to modify the signal anyway for to program their driveway into it. In his conclusion, he said the traffic signal timing plans will be further refined during the design process and submitted for review by the town in order to reach agreement on optimal signal timing. The second bullet was, with the construction of the site drive, ADA compliant ramps will need to be constructed at the sidewalk locations and a crosswalk marked across the driveway to facilitate crossing Plymouth Street from the site to the Stop and Shop site. And Mr. Gillen saying that the proponent should make these improvements, and any new vegetation or site signage adjacent to the site driveway on Plymouth Street should be cut low lying, less than 2 feet tall, and or set back sufficiently to maintain adequate sight lines, basically so that there's no bushes or signs placed there that are going to obstruct sight lines for people exiting the driveway if they were going to take, for instance, a right on red after a stop. Those were the conclusions that, or the recommendations by Mr. Gillen. I know that he had extensive conversations with Mr. Scully about that. So I think it would be probably prudent to have Mr. Scully maybe chime in on those items.
Okay, that'd be good. I would like Mr. Scully to comment on it. And then I know one of the zoning board member, Peter Parslin, had particular interest in making sure the intersection where they didn't allow was safe. So, Peter, if you have any questions or anything, just jump right in, please, or let us know if you have questions of Mr. Scully. Mr. Scully, are you there?
Yes, I am. I had to unmute. So let's see. I'm going to try to share my screen a little bit. So, again, for the record, my name is Bill Scully. I'm with Green International Affiliates. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So I don't know how much you want me to get into the project and the traffic impact or traffic findings. I can do that. I'll start out by saying, we did prepare a traffic impact and access study as part of the project, and it was submitted probably, a year ago, almost, probably a little over. And then that was reviewed by the peer review consultant. And as you heard, he had some comments. In general, his findings were, he concurred with our analysis, our estimates of traffic, our data collection, data processing, and recognized that we followed an acceptable and standard process to assess impact of the project. And we were probably a little bit conservative in our numbers, our estimate of traffic to be generated by the project. And that said, and I'm not positive, when it was initially planned as part of, in terms of the project, where the site drive is, if the applicant had thought that, they could bring a drive in there without tying into the traffic signal. But as we did our study, we recognized you can't bring an uncontrolled driveway into the middle of that intersection with the Stop and Shop drive without bringing it under signal control. So that's where first we started. And in the original study, we just ran everything together so that the two side streets, the Stop and Shop drive, the site drive, would operate at the same time under green time. And in the analysis, the original analysis showed that that would work. And largely it works because our project is a fairly low volume generator of traffic. But the peer review said, okay, you are offset. It's not a major offset, but it's, as you heard, 10 to 12 feet of the center line. Can you take a look at that? And what we were trying to do is not to the east of where the site drive is proposed. We've got traffic control box, utility pole, mast arm pole, I believe. So some substantial things that we were trying to avoid having to redo. They add tens of thousands of dollars to the project, but we knew we had to come into the traffic signal, so there is going to be some construction needed and some modifications. So we looked at and based on the peer review's recommendation, trying to split the phasing. That means Stop and Shop goes. When Stop and Shop drive finishes, then our site goes if there's any demand on the site drive. So the signal on our site would be part of an actuated signal. So with loops, if there's no demand on that approach, then the green time wouldn't be called for our site, only when the demand is sitting on that driveway. By running split, it certainly it addresses the offset, so you wouldn't have a situation where a left turn coming out of Stop and Shop was conflicting with maybe someone trying to go through to Stop and Shop. If they were more aligned, you could run it the same way, and the left turn would, in theory, have to yield to the oncoming through vehicle. But the split phasing takes care of that. And we tested a lot of different signal timings over the last few weeks, and I had, as you heard, a number of communications with Jack Gillen. We tested various things. We tested signal coordination timing, adjustments with this signal as well as the other nearby two signals, and found that everything works. So where we were having minimal impact on operations anyways, at the Stop and Shop signal, as well as the Walmart signal and the Route 58 signal, when we started to, sometimes when you do a split phasing, sometimes it creates a lot more delay because now you're stopping more people. But again, because we're such a low demand, we just you're not going to even have much time given to our site drive for that. So the analysis which we provided to the peer review showed that everything works, levels of service stay essentially the same between not having the site drive there and having the site drive and the project there. So we look at the no build versus the build. Levels of service, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon, will be level of service C or higher at each of the intersections. So the worst intersection is the Route 58 intersection. It's busier, it has more movements and all that. And that's going to be level of service C with or without the project. In the PM is the higher volume period. The Stop and Shop and the Walmart drive will function at level service A or B, depending on the time period. And again, with or without the development project. Everything you heard in terms of the recommendations, we were suggesting that in probably a more general way in the original traffic report, but certainly the peer review brought out a little bit more detail, and I've been working with our team, and we're committed to all of those items. It's going to need design changes in terms of signal timing. We have to add a couple of signal heads and posts facing our site. We'll have to modify the signal timing, potentially modify the timing through the system, and then construct the changes. And how I left it in our response to comments, and I think the peer review concurred, is that, upon approval of the project, as a condition, then we have to do this work. We'll submit the plans and the timing plans to the town for additional review and concurrence. And even in our response, we say, hey, we've shown how we can make this work. We'll finalize all the timing plans during the design of the project. That's where you can get into a lot more detail of what is needed to be done. Clearly, if we have residents in our site who want to walk across to the Stop and Shop area, so we'll provide that ADA ramp, the crosswalk, get them across safely, and that's part of the commitment as well. And I think that's all. If you want to hear, just general impact kind of things, I can talk about it, but I think, Plymouth Street, it's 2 lanes, the intersections have turn lanes at them, so they operate pretty well. The Stop and Shop driveway doesn't have a high crash history over the recent historical past that we've seen. The signal's very visible along the street, so the site drive access is going to be then part of that high visibility condition. And I think that's it. I'll stop. If you have any other questions, then I'll try to answer them.
Pete, do you have any concerns there?
Yeah, I do. I looked over the traffic study and I kind of listened to what you're saying. So, so it sounds to me I appreciate all the work that you did, because it sounds like you were pretty thorough on all that stuff. I don't know if anybody's spent this much time looking at that intersection, so I appreciate it. But I guess my question is, so I'm looking at this and based on the either the peer review memo or something that I'm looking at here has these like daily trips estimation.
Yes. Yeah.
So it looks like, since this is a residential area, it looks like there isn't, like you mentioned. I don't know if that's me.
I hope it's not me.
Somebody's planting.
I don't know. Somebody's riding a motorcycle.
Sounds like a race car or something. That's
Rebecca's cat.
So it looks like it does look like there's not a lot of volume. It looks like there's, in the morning, there's like 20 outbound trips. I would assume that the green light needs to change because of the outbound trips. I would assume, right?
That's correct. That's what.
And so it looks like 20, in the morning there's. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So 20 trips. That's the high in the morning. It's lower than that in the afternoon because more people are coming in.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, and this is. It's less about any of the traffic study. It sounds like it'll be a safe intersection. It sounds like the plans will need to be adjusted to make that happen. I think everybody knows how to do that. I guess my overall question is the impact of this development on the traffic that we already see on 106. So I guess the way I'm looking at this is, in the morning you have 20 outbound trips, in the afternoon you have 12 outbound trips. So it sounds like, because this project doesn't want to align their road and spend the money to move those things, like the poles and the boxes. So because they don't want to spend that money, even though they're getting around all our bylaws, the town is then going to have to wait 32 extra times a day for an extra green light on 106 because they don't want to spend the money to align the road. Is that?
Well, I wouldn't really say that.
Bill, before you answer, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I mean,
who's speaking? I have no idea.
Actually, hold on a second. I'd like an answer to my question from the engineer.
Yes.
And I think the chair has to recognize you before you speak. You've interrupted twice now, and I'm just trying to get an answer to my question.
So,
am I wrong, Mr. Chairman?
No, you're absolutely correct, Mr. Scully.
So there's going to be a pretty good cost to do what we need to do. So it's not like avoiding costs, but we're not trying to triple the cost. So instead of $50,000, it becomes $150,000. Okay, so we do have a cost, and we recognize that. The amount of volume that's on the street right now, and we're adding, like you say, 20 or 12 trips in the afternoon. It's 12 trips in the afternoon leaving versus you have out there projected somewhere around 1,350. You have less than 1% increase in volume impact. So you really, 20 trips in an hour. It's one vehicle on average every 3 minutes. So the cycle length is going to, let's say, go through in 60 minutes. It's going to go through its timing, let's say in theory, 45 times. Okay. And there's going to be maybe 12 of those 45 times where you're going to need 6 to 8 seconds to clear a vehicle on the site drive. So I wouldn't say, all of our analysis has shown it's not being impacted. And shifting the drive over isn't going to change. It's not going to change really the impact other than it's going to be a cost. And I'd almost rather have the split phasing with the lower volume. We're so low compared to, let's say, Stop and Shop coming out.
Yeah.
That even if we were perfectly aligned, we didn't suggest it, but just as this discussion occurred over the last month and a half, I might have sat there and said, it doesn't really make sense not to try the split phasing anyways, because we only have 12 cars coming out in the afternoon, and Stop and Shop might have over 100.
Yeah. But I guess my question is, to the Stop and Shop, there may be 3 or 4 coming out at once. It's unlikely that we're going to have multiple cars coming. It's probably going to be one car causing that green light for everybody to have to wait to maybe take a left on 106. And I guess my question really is, and it sounds like you have thought about this, which is
you're talking about the Stop and Shop drive? The Stop and Shop drive?
I'm talking about, I guess my big concern is there's already when you're coming from Kingston, there's a line back by the vet. If you're coming down from East Bridgewater, there's a line down by the country club. So I'm just concerned about that becoming, and I guess the volume is less the concern than the weight. And I just want to make sure that we aren't saving somebody money at the expense of the time of this step.
No, because so aligning would not really change a thing from.
But it would not create an extra light.
Maybe you're right. But at the same time, you might have someone who wants to go through to Stop and Shop hanging up the left turn movement. So you have a conflict, potential conflict. So I would say maybe it's actually safer to go with the split because of the large volume difference and a little bit of the alignment. Now, I will say that in the last month, so you saw a lot of things that we did prior to the last month. We did reams of analysis of just trying this cycle length, trying that cycle length, trying having a cycle length and say, okay, let's give more time to Plymouth Street no matter what. More time than it may have even today. Let's do that to manage, because there's one thing Jack and I talked about was, we want to manage the queues as best we can. You have 3 signals within probably less than 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
So the more time we can platoon a vehicle coming through, you hit one signal and you just go through the whole system, the more we can do that, the better. So, again, all of our analysis has shown really good operations can be done, better operations probably than done today. We'll have to fine tune it during the design. And I'd suggest that you're really not buying anything if you move this over 12 feet, other than having the project incur, like I said, probably 3 times the cost, and we may have to go split phasing anyways, and you're gonna end up with the same overall results in terms of levels of service. So that's my,
Thank you.
that's my,
Thank you.
hopefully, yep.
Mr. Scully, I have a couple of questions, then I'll open up the other member of the board too. So if I understand it correctly, at no time will there be a green light from the Country Club Estates Drive and a green light at the same time from Stop and Shop Drive? There'll be two.
Under
they
the
won't be
present,
same.
under the current concept that we just agreed to with your peer review, that's true.
Okay, and the only other thing I can agree with Pete there, granted, if it was 3 times the cost to implement equipment and whatnot, it could also be certainly something to consider. That'd be 3 times the cost for public safety. And if there are people, I'm glad they put in for the sidewalks and the crosswalks and whatnot, because that's my main concern, Pete. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yep.
Same thing. And I also spoke with Mr. Brennan earlier, and he suggested I ask you about it. I noticed on your letter or your email that you had sent regarding the numbers and whatnot. On the bottom chart there, where it was in color, you were basing your figures and whatnot on a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. Being the state highway on 106 there, the speed limit's 35. It doesn't change to 25 until you get up closer to the Walmart signal. So I didn't know if that was going to make any effect on your numbers, on your research, and on your deliberations there.
It won't make much of a difference, if any. I don't know which sheet you're referring to.
I believe it's on page 6 of 12. It was like the second or third line
most
from the
recent.
top, if I remember correctly. It showed 25 miles an hour, and I didn't know if that would certainly affect the speed. I would imagine would certainly affect the queue time and the number of queues in the course of a set period. So that was my concern there too, that we were getting accurate projections.
I'll check that and I can report back. I'm trying to look where we might have. And
I've spoken with Mr. Brennan also this afternoon, and the chances of, I don't know, somehow maybe reducing the speed limit. We're approaching a 3-signal intersection like that. But living in town, we've all experienced, especially if you're coming northbound on 58 to take a left onto 106 to go westbound. I mean, traffic can stop there in the intersection, and you have cars sitting in the intersection now. So, to have accurate queue times and whatnot, I do think is essential.
I'll double check on that and get back. I'll report back to the board.
I appreciate that.
In writing, and then okay.
Gentlemen, anybody else on the board that have any questions of Mr. Scully before?
Just real quick, I have one.
Yes, Dan.
Why there's a slew of variances that are being asked for? I don't see. Looks like there's room. I have a very small copy of the layout. Looks like there's room to line it up and change the variance on looking from the top to the right. Why would it be so expensive and 3 times more? And you haven't laid the pavement down yet. What's the extra cost in aligning the 2 entrances? I just don't see it. I don't even see why it would be an issue.
I don't know. What do you mean by variance? We're not asking for a variance of that, but the offset.
Well,
so if we line it up, and we need handicap ramps, we need the sidewalk rounding to get people across the street. All of a sudden, we're pretty close to the control box and the utility pole and everything else over there. Utility poles them alone, these days, the utility companies are charging $50,000 just to move it, and you may not be able to just move one. They have to be aligned. So if we have to shift that one over somewhere, then we have to get them to agree to the alignment. If the alignment changes, then it may be 3 or more utility poles that have to get adjusted. And I can tell you with all the road work we're doing, road design work for towns and DOT, they're getting hit with, I'm telling you, like $50,000 a pole to move. The mast arm pole that you see out there, that would have to be modified. So you have to pull that, pour a new foundation, probably get a new mast arm pole. Mast arm pole. Not going out. We probably can use what's going out over the road, the arm, but not the pole. So all of that stuff. What we're trying to do is, if we can make the offset work, which we know we can from a traffic point of view, we have to add signal posts, signal housings, and signal detection. For our site drive, we do have to modify, I believe, one of the posts facing Stop and Shop Drive. So there are things that we have to do, and it doesn't become a practical solution to an item that you can address through signal timing. And like I said, if you lined them both up, I mean, our drive's going to be smaller than Stop and Shop Drive, and the volume differential is just substantial. So that you may end up, a lot of times you'll see, sometimes there's projects around the area that it's a four-way intersection, signalized. And from an operations and safety point of view down the road, they say, let's split the phasing and give everyone a better way to make the turn on the road without having to conflict with the opposing left or opposing through movement. And so you go split. So if we ended up splitting, then it's not doing any different than having the road where we are proposing. And being pragmatic about it as well. It's not going to create a problem. And I can't even, I don't know what the property line is over there or the drainage from the site. Maybe the site engineer can chime in on that, but that could be impacted as well.
Okay, any other board members have anything to ask of Mr. Scully or even Mr. Brennan for that matter regarding the traffic study? Dan, does that answer your question? Or you all set with that?
The answer's it, yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Who is that?
That's me, Amy.
Oh, okay. Sorry, didn't have you up there. Okay.
Sorry. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I know I missed the last meeting. Is there a cost? Has anybody given us a cost for the alignment versus the additional light?
I have not heard or seen one.
We haven't developed. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Mr. Chairman? Can you hear me?
Who was that?
Paul.
Yes, Paul, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
we have taken a look at some of those numbers, and they're very guesstimated at this stage. What we're proposing to do is going to be somewhere in the range between $75,000 and $100,000. Is what we estimate would be the cost to do what we're proposing. If we were to align it and do all the things that Bill was talking about, we think that could be $250,000 to $300,000. It's very guesstimated at this stage, but those are the rough ball numbers.
So if you're guesstimating, there's no way that you could actually state that it would make the project uneconomical.
I'm not sure whether I could or couldn't. It seems to me it could be uneconomical, but more importantly, there's no, as Mr. Scully had indicated, that there's, even if the entrances were aligned, we still would probably he would still most likely recommend the phasing of those lights. So I really don't gain anything. We might still have to do the phasing, even so it's even more costs. So I think it's whether it's economical or uneconomical is for further debate, but I don't think it's necessary. Based on also my understanding is that Mr. Gillen is in concurrence with what Mr. Scully is suggesting.
Okay. Amy, does that satisfy you? Do you need anything else?
No, I don't. It definitely doesn't mean that the project will be more uneconomical. I think that both Mr. Parcell and Mr. Borgani brought up very good points about. I mean, you're adding an extra light, and it's a tough road. I mean, I drive that road when I have to come to your meetings, and it's tough. And to add another light seems tough, but I'm more interested in the cost. And if they're just guesstimates, they're just guesstimates. So that's fine.
How about I'm sorry, Pete, what were you saying?
Just two quick comment. I'd like to see a real estimate that kind of outlines what that would look like. And I'd also like to hear, I just know if this project goes in for 30 years, people are going to drive down that road and wonder why there's an extra light for, however many units are down there, and they're going to think it was ridiculous. Because every time I've seen off-lined intersections, I drive through them wondering why they didn't line it up. So if we're going to change the structure of the traffic of a state highway through the middle of our town, I think, specific numbers and looking at it. And I also like to hear from the police department about what they think about that as well. So, I'm not necessarily sold on the fact that isn't. It's 32 times a day. This town is going to have to wait for somebody to take a left out there, on an already busy road. Sorry.
Yep. No, I understand. But Mr. Brennan, can you want to come in on this or give us your opinion?
I mean, the traffic engineers agreed that obviously it would be safer to have the split timing. Just with what they're talking about for the increase in cost, I'd say they're probably in the neighborhood, but I don't know. I don't have specific numbers either. I mean, I haven't run an estimate on it, but there is a fair amount of work to make those driveways line up. And as Mr. Scully said, even with them lined up, it would probably be safer to operate them with the split timing, so that you don't have the green light in both directions coming out of Stop and Shop in the site driveway. But again, I don't have any idea of the cost at this point. I just know it would be much more expensive to line them up, but I don't know what that number is.
Pat, would there be a big difference in the timing that would have to be adjusted on the Walmart driveway and the 58 and 106 one to accommodate the split timing that would have to be done on these two drives?
No, I don't believe so. And that's why in both of the traffic engineers were talking about when they do the final design on this, they're going to look at all three of the lights so that anything they do, it's not going to impact the overall effectiveness of or the traffic movements going through that 3 signal stretch there. That's what the two traffic engineers have been looking at for the past month. And obviously everything right now is conceptual basis, but it's something that the applicant has committed to doing that design and making those changes if the project is approved. I think, obviously I think it would be better if they're lined up center line to center line, but if the recommendation from the traffic engineers would be to split that timing that way too, then I think it just comes down to cost at that point.
All right. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? I don't know. Could the picture of the intersection there be taken down so I could have a full screen here on? Thank you. All right, Mr. Cusson, how are you? Here we are. We have the new. I'd like to move on to the, to some of the other key issues that we touched on our last meeting, and the continuing to tonight's hearing allowed you an opportunity to submit a new site plan.
I checked in as well. It's only about 1.5 feet. Yeah.
I'm sorry, who was that? I have no idea who that was. Anyway, Mr. Cusson, would you care to discuss the new site layout that for the Country Club Estates? There seems to be some pretty substantial changes on that. If you'd like to make that.
What I'm going to do is actually just turn it over to Rebecca. Yeah, there at the one of the questions that came up at the last meeting was the issue of the septic system, being located on a piece on which we have an easement and the right to do that. I still think that by having the easement gives us the proper site control that we need in order to do that. But however, Rebecca has relocated the septic system and made a couple of changes. So Rebecca, if you could explain what we've done, or what you've done.
Mr. Cousins, first of all, as long as we were on the easement regarding the gives the proper site control, I did hear from our own town council, Amy Questle. We did receive a letter regarding that. Amy, could you touch on that, please? If Charlie, you could unmute her, please.
Sure, she's unmuted.
Sure.
Oh, now she is. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I actually echo what Pat Brennan had already given this opinion. It's straight out of Title V that locating it, and it clearly states that locating a system component or any part thereof beyond a property line of the facility, whether pursuant to an easement or otherwise, requires a variance in accordance with 310 CMR 15.4. So 15.410. So you cannot claim that there's site control because you need a variance. And that
a variance from who, Amy? I'm a little unclear. Is that
so that would be a variance from the Board of Health. Okay. But essentially you can't claim that you have site control when you actually need relief. You actually need the relief. So, if this was a variance, if this was an easement, for them to put a driveway on or something like that, I think it's a little bit different. But here, it's not. It's they need a variance from the Board of Health just to put these components on. So I do not think that it qualifies. I do not think it brings them into site control because of that reason.
Charlie, can you unmute Rebecca Batista there so she can maybe give us a little information on this?
Yep. Oh, there we go.
I assume that was the Rebecca we were talking about. Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen again.
Sure.
Thank you. So I don't have much input on site control on the septic. I know that in the process of adjusting and addressing some other comments, I have made changes to the size of the cul-de-sac for fire apparatus. And in doing so, I've actually removed 2 units.
Well,
and
Rebecca, not to interrupt you or anything, but can we kind of stay on the subject of the easement and the? I'd like to finish that first before we moved on to the other thing.
I was trying to show that the changes of reducing the units actually puts the primary area on site and not off site as it was before. So when it comes to site control and if an easement, I don't have an opinion on that. I would have to defer that to an attorney who could cite. But I did revise the plans to put the primary septic on site. The reserve at this size probably could be moved on site as well. So we could almost, with a little more work on and changing the plans, avoid this conflict of site control, I guess is my story. I could
Amy,
move the reason.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
With a little more maneuvering of some of these facilities, I would be able to put the reserve on site.
Both the primary and the secondary.
Yes, the primary right now fits on site. With the revisions that I've made, by losing 2 units, I'm able to put the primary on site, and with a little more work, we can avoid the conflict of easement site control for the septic.
All right, Amy, I guess my question then is, do they, in the Title V, do they make a distinction between primary has to be and secondary doesn't have to be? Or I'd have to refer to you or Mr. Diaz from the conservation.
Yeah. Alan might have or I'm sorry, Chairman Diaz might have a better idea than I do, but it does say locating a system component or any part thereof. So, but I think he would know better. I did have, since we're talking about the, since we're talking about the plan and how it's changed. So I do see that it says, septic primary area and the, in the square foot, but there's no setbacks to the units that are right next to it. I was wondering how far those units were, and if the setback complies with Title V, and I can't do the calculation myself. Actually,
Well,
there's not.
There are no calculations, right?
I don't see a scale. Yeah.
Right.
No, the scale is far out. It's zoomed out, but the primary is 20 plus feet away from the building foundation as per code. The square footage, I know Mr. Diaz had concerns about whether this was pressure dosing, and I know he's probably going to make a comment, or I could be presuming that the size of the system. We went with a Presby system, which provides additional treatment that Mr. Diaz was looking for, and it doesn't require pressure dosing. So I know Mr. Diaz probably would like to share his thoughts.
So if it's if it's a Presby system, is there additional maintenance to that system?
There are. Well, when you say maintenance.
Are there annual inspections?
Yes.
Okay. So, and is this a condominium association?
It would be.
Okay. And how many units now that you've dropped a couple? So 14?
Let me just take a peek. Units 15 and 16 duplexes. So we've lost 4 units. So now we're down to 28. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry. My question was wrong. How many affordable units do you have?
Oh, still the same, because the ratio, it was 30. Now it's still the same number of 7 affordable units.
Okay.
I thought it was 8.
Thank you.
It was 8.
Was it an 8?
I thought it was.
Mr. Cusson?
Mr. Cusson.
It's 25. What it will be 25% or whatever the final number of units are that's approved, and
So
if so whatever that ends up, whatever the total number ends up being. Right now, my understanding is that we had 30 units.
No, I thought you started with 32.
Well, we lost 2, so we're down to 30. So it would be, if it ends up being 30 units, it would be 8 units.
Okay, so we did lose 1 affordable unit by those calculations. At 28 units, we'll now have 7 affordable units.
All right. If Amy, are you all set? Did you have your answers? Answers
For
that
now,
you
I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, Alan. Let me switch over to Mr. Diaz. You can shed some light on this. Maybe educate us unknowing people here that I don't understand.
Okay, Alan Diaz, co-chairman of the Board of Health. We had originally had concerns about the septic system being off-site, and we would still have some concerns based on this new plan. Both the primary and the reserve areas need to be on site. Those are part of the facility, as part of our language in Title V. So those need to be on there. I can address that. And if she wants to get into the pressure dosing part of it, which, Mr. Chairman, you haven't really talked about yet. We were just talking about the septic area and the easement. I can just stay to that, or I can continue on with the other concerns of the board. But
Well, let's do the on-site first, and then we'll move right into that, Alan. If you don't mind.
the entire septic system has to be fully Title V compliant, and both the primary and reserve areas are components of the septic system, and they have to be on site.
Okay, and Rebecca, you think you can move that secondary one back on? Where would you put that, Rebecca, or where would that be situated?
I would move some utilities that were underground under that parking area, and they would be right in this area.
Mr. Chairman?
It would be, so that second, that bottom one there that says,
Yep, so this reserve, yep, this reserve
that says
would go,
5,000 square feet. You have 5,000 square feet there
yes,
to put the
Yeah,
secondary?
yeah, it would be underground. Yeah, yes, there is
Is that
6,000
acceptable, Alan? Can that be done underground? I don't know.
under
Yeah.
pavement? Yes.
Presby's can be, with the proper coverage, and they can be underneath pavement. So
Okay.
it could be underneath that parking area.
All right, so Rebecca, we would be interested in seeing that if you could, possibly by certainly our next meeting or whatever. And Alan, why don't we move on to the second part there that you were interested in?
Okay, she had mentioned about pressure dosing and pressure distribution. These units all have one single septic tank. The original plan showed it going to an effluent pump, and then that pump was directly to the Presby unit. Am I correct, Rebecca?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, Title V requires that if you have a pump type system, which this would be because everything goes to an effluent pump, the units require a storage capacity in the event of a power outage. So you would not only need a 1,500 gallon tank, but based on the number of bedrooms in each particular unit, you would need a minimum 1,000 gallon tank for that emergency storage capacity in the event the power went out. In this particular scenario, all these septic tanks gravity feed to this affluent pump area. And there are no pumps directly from the units to this area. So they would have to incorporate it based on my math. They've reduced some of the units, but even at 30 units, you would need a 7,000 or 8,000 gallon storage capacity tank somewhere on this facility in the event that there was a power outage. And that's based on the 100 gallons per day per bedroom, and it has to be 1/3 capacity. So they can do the math on that, but that's going to be a 6,000 to 7,000 gallon tank. And that obviously is going to either have to have backup generator power or some source in the event that you have any extended period of power outage. So what she was referring to as far as pressure dosing and pressure distribution, those are two terms in Title V. One with pressure dosing is you're applying the effluent on the septic system through a pump system. Well, this is pressure dosing, whereas you're pumping that to a gravity-fed leaching field, which is the Presby. So there needs to be some more design work based on those comments. I don't know that you agree with me or not, Rebecca?
Yes, I agree with the tank. We've done similar septics of this capacity in West Bridgewater as a shared subdivision, both of which are under maintenance agreements, both of which are functioning. One of them is 5 years now, one of them is 3 years. And yes, we've come up with creative ways to provide the emergency storage and to address these concerns that Title V brings up. So we can look at that in more detail.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be a problem.
Okay.
Chairman?
Can we have that, Rebecca, by our next meeting, our next hearing?
A full septic design or just a schematic of where the tanks are going to go?
And or both.
And or both. I'll see what I can do.
Okay. Mr. Cusson, would you like to jump in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of the things we're also taking a look at is presently where Rebecca is showing the reserve. We are presently trying to work with the lender on Halifax Country Club to see if we can get a release from the mortgage to allow a certain part of land to be released from the mortgage and made part of this development. So we're doing two things simultaneously.
Oh, okay, but we can only evaluate what we have in front of us here, Mr. Cusson.
I understand. And the other thing is that, you know, normally what would happen at some point in time when the board is comfortable, they would issue a decision. And obviously, a lot of the final design plans, including a lot of the septic information, would be part of the final set of plans yet still to be approved.
All right. Mr. Diaz, I know you and I had spoke before too. Are you concerned, are we going to get elevations and whatnot? You were concerned with the topography here on how we had the water flow from, well, basically from the Plymouth Street area north heading south. Did you have concerns regarding that maybe we can have Rebecca, you know, address those issues?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman, and that's going to be my other hat from the planning board. Having reviewed the plan and having participated in one of the abutters, the O'Reilly property, I did notice that the wetlands line on this particular parcel, which was determined in 2015, was dramatically different than the 2018 plan from the O'Reillys. This particular plan shows a drainage basin that on the O'Reilly plan is within the wetlands area. My concerns with that was that the O'Reilly's project included a catch basin that was right on Route 106 to be drained through their parcel into their basin. So when I looked at the elevations of that basin and that pipe coming out was about 3 feet lower than the proposed basin. 3 feet lower than the proposed basin that they have, which is in the wetlands. So I'm really not clear on how they determined the wetlands on this plan. And then we have a 2018 determination that where that basin is, that's 100% wetlands. And she can comment on that. My other concern with looking at the drainage and looking at the percolation test or the observation holes that were done in the drainage basins, there's a fairly substantial amount of affluent that's going to be, or stormwater that's going to be going through this project. It appears to me that they did a very good job with the basins that they have, which are off-site, they're on the country club property. My concern was that because all of these basins are in silt loam, there's no permeable soil at all in any of the observation test pits that I looked at the plan, that these things are going to hold water every month except for maybe June and July, maybe a little bit of August when the sun, and their outlet from all of this affluent, once it goes through these bays, is into a pond that's on the country club property, which they have no control over. And it's problematic to me that if they have no control over that, if that pond fills up, there's going to be no place for the stormwater from this project to go other than to back up through the 4 bays into the basins. That to me was problematic.
All right, first of all, Mr. Diaz, on the plan that's before us, the new site layout here, when you refer to O'Reilly's, you're referring to the lot up there that's labeled Cumberland Farms Incorporated, map 63, lot 30.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's where O'Reilly's is, and that basin and whatnot is just below that to the right.
If Yes, right over in that area there, it shows, I think, some trees. It shows one tree at the corner of the property line, and then it shows those where the detention basin is. On the O'Reilly's plan, and I did review the conservation logs and the notice of intent filed by O'Reilly's, that's a wetlands area. And they did the wetlands testing based on soils and species. And from the report that I read, it appeared to be correct. So we have a differentiation in lines here.
How much of a difference is Mr. Beers? I mean, how many feet are we talking?
We're talking about, if you want to look at the plan, wetlands flag from this plan being, I believe it's 4A. There's a 120-foot difference. The wetlands flags from the O'Reilly's property are right at the corner where it says proposed guardrail or something. There's a tree in the corner. The wetlands line goes to that corner. So from that corner to the other line is 120 feet of area that this plan shows as being non-wetlands. O'Reilly's plan shows that it is wetlands.
Rebecca, if I could ask you, how can that happen?
We had our ORAD approved by Conservation in 2015. It was extended in 2018, which still makes our line valid. Now, there's an overlap with timing where O'Reilly came in and had it reflagged, and wetlands do change over time. We went with the approved line we had. This is the one that was shown on the O'Reilly plan of land before it was taken out. So it's a matter of timing. They have an approved line, we have an approved line.
How can they be 120 feet different, Rebecca?
I wish I had a good explanation for that. Again, we asked ours for approval in 2015. They extended it in 2018, so it is still current and valid. And O'Reilly came in with a different line, like having a second opinion.
And Alan, when did O'Reilly's line come into effect? Do you know the year? Is that 2018, 19, 20?
I think that was 2018 that line was established.
So in the same year, we have two different lines, 120-foot difference. Is that correct?
That's what I see from the plans. Mr. Chairman, and also in doing some of the research and looking at some of the site plans that were prepared by Silver Engineering, had a little difficult time trying to match up the lot lines, but I think we finally accomplished how they've gotten the size area that they have. But two of their plans that have been recorded at the Registry of Deeds were clearly marked that this particular area was not buildable. And I believe that those plans.
Do you have reference numbers to those, Mr. Diaz? Oh, here they are.
Yes, I do. It was a plan. It's in the planning board file, but I think it's a plan that is from Plan Book 57, page 877, I believe. It's a plan that was approved by the planning board in 2013. And the plan itself indicates that lot 6A, a portion of that, 25,497 square feet, had approved and read through Conservation Commission, which back in 2006 would have expired, but for some reason, there's an area on there of 25,000 square feet that was an agreed area of a no-build zone.
25,497, that's if I'm looking at it correctly?
Correct.
That's right.
Right. So I don't have an opinion as to why. We just found this information out, so some research is going to have to be completed on it. I can only assume that it could have been that this particular parcel lacked some adequate frontage. Brings me to the point where this parcel itself, when I look at this plan that they have submitted, I'm trying to ascertain where they have the necessary frontage. And I know this is a separate issue because we're talking about drainage, but just getting back to this plan, again, we'd have to really do some more research and get some sort of opinion as to why this is on the plan. And I'm not saying that that cannot be removed. It could have been put on there because this plan didn't have the required frontage. I am not 100% sure.
Amy, can you jump in on that, please, or maybe shed some light on this? Because I'm looking at both plans now, too, and even the one that Alan was just talking about, dated 4/26/17, recorded at the Registry of Deeds, also shows an approved wetland line on it also. If that sheds any light on how two different plans of the wetlands can be 120 feet different in the same year. I guess I'm just not following how that can even happen. I don't understand that.
So that's very, very concerning. So if the applicant is claiming that their ORAD was extended, and it could be valid. However, since this is a 40B, you guys are stepping in the shoes of the Conservation Commission, and I think that you probably have a right to look at that line. But I'm assuming that's why there's a difference, because O'Reilly came in after, and when this line was, when this ORAD was extended, no one actually caught the fact that the wetlands had changed. However, there is a provision in the Wetland Protection Act where if site plans change, et cetera, there could be grounds for a modification or a revocation of the permit. With regard to the unbuildable area that's shown on a plan, I know that Joe Pesnola had also had a question about this, and I do too. I don't think any of us have any answers. With regard to the frontage, because they are a 40B, they don't necessarily need the adequate frontage that any other development on this road would need, because they can ask for a waiver from frontage requirements under the zoning bylaw. But the back of this 25,497 square feet, that's a no-build zone. This is on a recorded plan at the registry. So it appears that could be it could be a valid title issue where we've got something at the registry saying this is no build.
All right.
Issue.
Could I refer to Joe Penzola? Are you on with us here, Joe?
I am, Mr. Chairman, yes. Good evening.
Hi, Joe. Can you shed some light on this? Because I am looking at a plan right here that they referred to, recorded at the Registry of Deeds with just those issues that we were just talking about. Maybe you can help me out here. I'm trying to understand this.
Right. Well, a restriction that's shown on a plan does not necessarily create a restriction or prohibition on building. Many times what happens during the A&R process, as Mr. Diaz referred to, there might be something about the lot, either a frontage question or something that may make the lot not buildable. And many times it's maybe a parcel is being created to be joined with another parcel. So the planning board many times, although they're not specifically tasked to, in their endorsement of an A&R subdivision, to deem or to validate the zoning compliance of the lot, sometimes the planning boards will ask that certain notes be added to a plan to reflect those existing geometric peculiarities of a particular lot. Here, there seems to be an area that's referring to a wetland delineation from 2006. So short of understanding exactly what, you know, the planning board had, looking at the planning board minutes of the meetings that led up to the endorsement of this plan, there's no way to know. But again, in my experience in dealing with planning boards and A&R plans and restrictions such as this, the mere noting on a recorded plan doesn't create what I believe to be a legally binding prohibition against that. There would have to be some other kind of document that memorialized that restriction, whether it be a conservation restriction that's filed with the state, or some other kind of document that was more binding to the landowner, or something in the deed. There can be self-imposed restrictions by landowners, but that has to show up in the title within the deed. So as I think Mr. Diaz put it well, there needs to be some more research into what's happening here.
Mr. Chair?
Understand.
Mr. Chair, Rebecca, can I?
Yes, Rebecca, I appreciate you.
I'd like to add a little bit more to this conversation, if you don't mind. Give me a moment.
Sure.
I'm going to pull up two plans, and one of them is going to be on my screen as soon as I can get this out of the way. Okay. Sorry. One more moment. I wasn't prepared to bring these up, so here we are. Okay, so
Yeah, Rebecca, because it does say on that specific plan that we've been referring
Yes.
to, it says agreed area of no build zone.
yes,
There
I
it is
believe
right
it.
there. Yeah, that's the one right there.
Yes. Okay. So I believe this was agreed to at the meeting from the planning board, and it could be, like Mr. Diaz said, the lack of frontage, some sort of agreement. But what I'd like to point out is that this plan separates into lot 30A and lot 6A in 2013. Okay. Then we come in and we divide 6A into 4 new parcels, and that note is gone. Whatever that note represented doesn't exist anymore. For whatever reason that note was agreed upon, once they changed the lots, the agreement disappeared. Now,
Even
I
if
would like
it was recorded in the deed, Rebecca?
I would like us all to look a little deeper to make sure that this is a correct assumption, but I didn't find it in the deed. I only found it on these plans, and it goes from one plan in 2013 and it disappears in another plan in 2017. Whatever was agreed upon when that original 6A was created didn't continue onward with the creation of these 4 lots.
So we have no idea who the agreement was between.
I don't know. I believe it was the developer at the time, but I'm speculating.
Okay,
But I do know that note has disappeared.
As long as we have you here, what about the wetlands issue?
Again, we get ours approved in 2015. We extend it in 2018. If they're O'Reilly's coming in with a new wetland line, our line is still valid. If Amy is correct that this could be deemed for a modification, or I don't know what to do at this point. Our line is still valid. If there's another line out there that's still valid, it happens a lot, but not by 120 feet.
Would have 2 different separate valid lines in the same
We
year,
don't see the backside. We don't see the backside of O'Reilly's wetland line. We only saw 20 so feet. I don't know if it comes back on itself. I don't know if this was just like a little finger following the back property line. I would need to know more on the delineation that O'Reilly presented.
Alan Diaz, can you shed any light on that with your research?
Yes, if we're looking at this particular plan, and I think I'm looking for the north arrow, but let's look at Plymouth Street. The O'Reilly's line goes from the Algers property, drops down into what you were calling the parcel A, and then comes back up to the corner of the O'Reilly property. So it's just a little drop down, probably, 40 or 50 feet in the center of that line into this parcel A. So it's substantial because if you look at their line itself and their 25-foot no-touch zone, it would appear that the only amount of wetlands was between parcel A and the Algers property, whereas the O'Reilly's plan indicates that everything, I guess, would be southwest or southeast of their parcel would be wetlands. And that's sort of, I think, something that the Conservation Commission needs to figure out. Just where are the wetlands there? I would say from looking at the O'Reilly's plan that everything around where the marking says parcel A would be considered wetlands.
But without seeing the backside of the O'Reilly wetland line,
we have a wetlands line on the O'Reilly's plan, like I said, that goes from the corner of the Algers property and then dips back and then goes in.
then it just dead ends right here. It doesn't give you the backside of it. That could be a thing.
I can only, from experience, say that anything that's south of that wetlands line would be wetlands. Anything north of that, they worked through the Conservation Commission and got permission to do what they needed to do. So,
okay, I don't argue with you, but I would like to point that sometimes when, as a developer or an engineer, I go for a wetland line to get approved, I only give them one side of the line. I don't give them the other side because they're not going to care. So if there is a backside to O'Reilly's line, it would really behoove us to find it, to find out what it is and where it is.
So basically what you should be going out there is doing a new delineation and do a new determination to see where the wetlands lines are. And then what an impact that it has on this particular project. Based on what I see, your drainage basin is in the wetlands. But again, you're right, there is no back line. So I think it'd be smart for you folks to go in and do an accurate determination and get these lines squared.
An updated.
Because we have an ORAD and we have an ANRAD. And this ANRAD would have expired. For some reason, it expired 11 years before the planning board endorsed the plan. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
You're talking about a different delineation.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
The delineation or this no bill, well, an ANRAD was filed.
Yes.
On this particular parcel. All right. It was filed in 2006.
It's an old one. Yes, that one's expired.
Yeah, the plan was created in 2013. So whatever the ANRAD line was back in 2006 would have expired in 2009. So why that language was on there, that I don't know.
Okay, but we're not talking about that one. We're talking about this 2015 one.
Yeah, I agree with you that the line disappeared. I don't know that this agreement, whatever that agreement was, this plan would have just eliminated that agreement, but we don't know what the agreement is. So
you're right.
We need to find out what that agreement was and then make a good determination with the Conservation Commission on where these lines are so you can proceed with this project knowing where everything is. Obviously, if there is a determination that the O'Reilly's line is accurate, then you can't put your basin in there. Now you're back to the drawing board. And the other problem we have is even if you do put your basin in there, that basin has to be lower. Otherwise, you'll cause flooding, not only in O'Reilly's, but you'll cause flooding on Route 106.
Does that make sense, Rebecca?
Well, yes, I understand everything he just said. Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Amy.
If I may, thank you. This is this is so confusing. I think perhaps we should have Amory look at the wetland line. We should have a wetland scientist take a look at this wetland line, because I'm very concerned about what Mr. Diaz just said about flooding on the O'Reilly property. So I think it would behoove us to have Amory take a look at that.
I agree. Pat, Mr. Brennan. Oh, there you are, right there.
Yeah, I can hire a wetland scientist to go out there and confirm the line for the board. Just so that, and it'll be a third party. It won't be, I'll get somebody that didn't do O'Reilly and didn't do the original one for the property owner. It'll be a third party that's working for the ZBA.
All right. Like you said, where are we going to go without that? You know, we can all talk, as long as we'd be talking apples and oranges for the, you know, if they were working off two different plans. I think that only makes sense.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Custin. Wait a minute. Mr. Custin, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Joe Pesnola.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. My bad.
Yeah. I really feel compelled to give my 2 cents here. The delineation and approval of a delineation of a wetland is the jurisdiction of the Conservation. Although the board is taking jurisdiction of some conservation matters under the local wetlands bylaw, the determination of the wetland boundaries is jurisdictional to the commission. And I think the board needs to reach out to the Conservation Commission and at least get the history of the germane wetland line here that the applicant has put forth, which is the 2015 ORAD that was extended in 2018, seemingly to 2021. I was involved in a Chapter 40B in the town of Sudbury, Mass, in which the Conservation Commission interjected and made a similar claim. I will say that it wasn't a 120-foot line change, and that is troubling in itself, but it was a different line that they felt compelled that they needed to force the applicant to revisit the line. They got input from Mass DEP, who said, with a valid order of resource area delineation, and that the line is the line is the line, and that they needed to hold that line because it was approved and extended. And the only reason that the commission could look at it, could revisit it, if it was found that there was a misrepresentation or misinformation presented during the original ANRAD. In that case, there was none. So I think we need to start with, I would recommend that you start with involving the Conservation Commission. I think for the board to engage a third-party peer reviewer, wetland scientists, to go out and actually physically do a study, not only, in my opinion, starts to move across jurisdictional lines, but it's also within 760 CMR 56, the 40B regulations. The board is only allowed to engage peer review for peer review and not independent studies of its own. So I think once the Conservation Commission has chimed in and, you know, if they believe there was misrepresentation or there was misinformation in the original ANRAD, or for whatever reason, and compelled the, and could compel the rescission of that ORAD, then yes. But again, it's something that has to be administered by the Conservation Commission under the wetlands regulations. I think with regard to the potential flooding and issues on with regards to the interaction of stormwater and grades between O'Reilly's 106 and this site, that is germane to this board's charge. And I think that working with your peer review engineers and the applicant's engineers, whether there's additional information needed, additional soil testing, additional elevations provided, cross sections, whatever that be, to give the board comfort that they've got their arms around that issue, and there's not going to be detriment to the O'Reilly's property or the public right of way, then this board should vet those issues.
So, do you feel, Joe, that the difference in the elevations, as Mr. Diaz pointed out, some pretty close to 3 feet, is enough to delve deeper into finding out exactly what the elevations, whether there's so much different. That's
so definitely. I mean, what I would suggest is that that the board request additional information on that and how those two properties interact. What is the bottom of the basin on the O'Reilly site, the detention basin on the O'Reilly site, and what is the proposed elevations of this drainage and grades and so forth. How is that those two areas going to interact? And as Mr. Diaz believes, there could be surcharging of the O'Reilly system, which then backs up into 106. So I think additional information from that standpoint needs to be provided to this board.
And Joe, where would we get that from? Who would provide that to the board?
You request it from the applicant. You request that additional information from the applicant, and then Pat takes a look at it to say whether it's sufficient, whether it answers the questions. Now, as I know Mr. Cusson will say, we're only required to provide preliminary information. We need to provide enough information to get this board comfortable that this is a buildable project without detrimental impacts to the neighbors and the public right of way. So that's where we are. That's the evolution through the process of asking for more information and getting it, and then having that information continually peer reviewed.
Rebecca, can we have that? Can we get that done?
Mr. Chairman?
It doesn't sound like Rebecca. I just asked her a question. Rebecca?
I'd like to answer that question.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
My first reaction to this would be to request the O'Reilly site plan, because although there may be 3 feet difference, I'm wondering if we're even on the same datum and elevation. And so I would actually be requesting from the planning board to review the files from O'Reilly as my first step in understanding what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, Alan Diaz.
Yes, Alan.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to give her. I have a full set of plans, and just so that you know, Rebecca, I did check the data to make sure that that your data and their data was on the same elevation. I know there's been a change in NVDG, but your proposed lines and their proposed lines were very similar.
We're on the same datum. Okay, I just wanted to.
And I did see on one of your plans some elevations. And that's where I spotted about a 3-foot elevation difference. O'Reilly's pipe coming out and your pipe. And the reason that it was fresh in my mind is that O'Reilly's had just submitted an as-built on their drainage system that was being reviewed. And that's what kind of brought this up.
Alan, can you provide Rebecca with that information, or can you forward that over?
Yeah, I have a full set of plans that I've been working with, and I believe we have something at the planning board. So we can make sure that there is a full set at the planning board. She can contact Joanne at the planning board office to make arrangements to pick them up.
That's
Rebecca,
awesome.
could
Thank
you do
you.
that then, and then maybe we can get to the bottom of this so we can
Oh, yes,
move right
absolutely.
along with this and keep things
Maybe
going.
at the same time, they can put their heads together and try to get a good determination on just where the wetlands are. Because I know in some instances, if there are wetlands there, then they have the ability to replicate on site. I just don't know that they got any space on site. Or, my suggestion is to get some clear indication as to where that wetlands line is, so that the project can move forward. I think that would be the next step for the applicant, but that's not my purview. That's the board's purview.
Mr. Cussin.
Yeah, I'm sort of a layperson. I'm very confused. But what I'm hearing is that I think the Conservation Commission really must be involved. And it's in 2018, we had a plan, we had a line that was approved. It was approved and then extended. And they certainly knew it wasn't like 10 years later. So they're working in the same year on two adjoining parcels. As Mr. Dias has done, he's taken a look at a very close look at different things and how they how those two parcels work together and regarding drainage. I would have thought that the Conservation Commission would have done the same thing. So how could they have approved two separate lines so differently? It's confusing to me. So I think they need to resolve it. We're willing to do whatever is necessary. And I hear what they're talking about, the drainage and those kinds of things. And Joe is absolutely correct. We do need only to provide preliminary plans, but we do need to give a level of comfort to the board that it does work. And we're willing to do all of that. But it's just confusing to me on this wetland line, how that board could have approved two lines so differently in the same year.
Alan?
I wanted to say that I've been in front of many conservation commissions. They base their information on the data they're given. If they're not given the information that's offsite, then you can't use that information. So obviously, when this plan was filed, as you can see, the wetlands line is strictly part of it goes into the O'Reilly's property, which is map 63 lot 30, and then it drops south. So whatever information that the applicant that did the ORAD in this particular case gave the Conservation Commission, they based their information on that. So I can see why there would be a difference. I think the key to this is that someone needs to hire a third party and go before the commission with these two different lines and see if they can come up with some sort of an agreement as to where that line is actually going to be. You can wait and go in front of the commission and ask them, but someone's going to have to do this third party line sooner or later. So that would be my suggestion, be ahead of the game, but that's up to the applicants.
Again,
it's not unusual to have a discrepancy on lines. That's not unusual.
But 120 feet difference or 130 feet difference?
That's very unusual.
And that's in the same year, both plans, well, one being approved, if I get it correctly, I understand it correctly, it was approved and extended to 2018, where O'Reilly's was a 2018.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the year, it's the site. I mean, the site changed somewhat, but not substantial enough to make the line move 120 feet.
All right, Amy, Crystal, how do I go about doing this? As far as getting, do our peer engineers handle that, getting in touch with conservation and determining the wetlands line or trying to verify it, or how do I go about doing that, Amy?
Obviously, I've already stated my opinion. In my opinion, 120 feet is huge. 120 feet is a very big discrepancy. And, if Mr. Pesnola, if he wants to cite 40B, he's correct. So let the applicant submit data and then we'll have Pat review it. But I just don't, I think this is a huge issue. I'm more concerned with the fact that, is O'Reilly's going to get flooded? I mean, you can't have a business that came into town that did all of their permitting and everything, and now this is going to come in, and because there's this discrepancy that we've discovered, so we know about this discrepancy, and now they're going to get flooded. So it has to get resolved in some way. 40B or not, it has to get resolved. So, if the applicant wants to submit information, then we would be peer reviewing that information.
Now, Amy, when you say reviewing the information, you mean having a third party come in and
No, because the applicant is going to go through the planning board file, and then the applicant had also mentioned that the backside of the wetlands might not be on the plan. I thought they were going to look into that more. But I think the applicant has to come back to us and tell us why there's a 120-foot discrepancy here. And also give us something to show us that O'Reilly's isn't going to get flooded.
Rebecca, can you comply with that request?
Yeah, we need to do a little bit more homework. I agree.
And then once that comes in, we'll have Pat take a look at it.
And have it
Yes.
reviewed.
Yeah.
I agree. All right. I guess, is there any sense going any further until we get this all established? That would be my next question.
So, Mr. Chairman, it appears that I'm just taking down some notes here, but we have from Mr. Diaz, thank you so much for being here. You've been so helpful. So we have the fact that the septic system has to be changed. So we have this reserve area that's on a separate property. So that has to be changed. And again, I don't know for sure, but it sounded to me like it possibly can be put underneath parking area. But when that comes in, I think that I would love if Mr. Diaz would take a look at it, but also I think that Pat needs to take a look at that and make sure that that's proper. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at, there were some issues regarding the stormwater detention, the detention basins and the, infiltration of those. And then the wetland line and the possible flooding of O'Reilly's or just this discrepancy. I think that those, and then the fourth thing is I am still very concerned with the fact that the recorded plan states by agreement with regard to this wetland area that's non-buildable, or unbuildable, I should say. So, and I know that the applicant had indicated that they were going to look at that, but I think that the planning board file on that needs to be looked at, agreed upon by who. There was, I heard numerous times, assumption and assumed and all of these things. Well, unfortunately, we can't do that. We can't assume. So we need to know who agreed on this and if there was any other kind of agreement on that that's somewhere else and why. It would be nice, but.
Amy, Bob Durgan, I want to add to that also the April 2017 map also shows two of those parcels being unbuildable also. So I have a question about that.
So those have the parcels in parcel B. Is that the one, like parcel B you're talking about as unbuildable?
Parcel B and parcel A.
Right.
Not a buildable lot.
So I'm not quite sure about parcel A. Parcel B, and again, I'm assuming here, but I think it's because parcel B had no frontage.
Yes, correct.
But you typically don't see unbuildable lots on lots that have no frontage.
So what I don't understand is why lot, I think it's 6A and 6B, why those didn't just continue, why parcel B didn't become part of those lots. But you can, I have seen where there is a parcel that remains unbuildable on a plan. It eventually gets transferred to the abutter when I've seen this, but in this instance, I would assume that parcel B is unbuildable because there's no frontage, and that gets knocked out because of 40B. So that, you know, combining all these.
Even
lots.
parcel A
Yeah.
being unbuildable, it has the frontage, but because of 40B, it gets knocked out.
It doesn't have any frontage, but because of 40B,
But
they can combine all of these.
Parcel A does.
Parcel A, I'm not sure why parcel A is listed as unbuildable. It might be because it doesn't have enough frontage, or Pat seems to know.
That's correct.
So you could do an estate lot on that, so you would have frontage.
Wow.
Mr.
Pat.
Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have the required frontage for a single lot. It may for.
But I think an estate lot needs 50 feet.
50 feet.
So it
Yeah,
does
so maybe-
have required frontage.
But it doesn't have the area for an estate lot. And at the time of creating this plan, it was to create 2 buildable lots, 6A and 6B. Parcel B at the time, there's site issues in the neighborhood that they were holding on to it in case, like Amy said, it was going to be transferred to an abutter. That didn't need to happen. And so parcel A at the time of this plan and parcel B were not considered buildable at that time.
Is that an assumption, or are you sure that's not because of the previous agreement and they just didn't mark that on this new plan?
No, my understanding was parcel B was just in case LHB Enterprises needed room for the septic, which we were able to repair the septic on site and they didn't need the land. That's what I heard off the record, but that's why parcel B was hanging out right there. Parcel A was not a buildable lot at the time. It didn't have proper frontage and zoning to meet a buildable lot, whether it be estate or anything, because it didn't have the area for the estate and it didn't have a frontage for a normal lot.
So why was it even a separate lot? Why didn't it just become part of 6A? I mean, I understand your explanation about parcel B.
Because they're trying to sell these parcels as parcels to be sold for a business. And so they're trying to be cheap. 1 acre exactly is what you need. So that's what they're going to give them.
And what were they going to do with
We've
parcel
done that
A
for a
then?
while now.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What would they do with parcel A? They're just going to pay taxes on it.
Oh, they had connected land in the back, which is why we're here for development, because R&J LLC owns the piece in the back of parcel A, which is the heart of where all our buildings are going.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
if I may,
Who's that?
Alan Diaz.
Yes, Ellen.
She's correct. Parcel A, parcel B. Both of these are non-buildable because they don't have, parcel A doesn't meet the estate lot requirements and it doesn't have the required frontage for a regular lot. But just a little bit of history in that area. I think the Cumberland Farms complex would be map 63 lot 7. That, if I'm looking at this right, there was been a lot of issues over there with the septic system, and I believe that a portion of the septic system could very well be on this parcel B, or they could have tried to keep that to put the septic system on there. There are a couple of septic systems on there. There's one in the front of the old Cumberlands. It would be the Verizon building now, and the pizza shop. That's had some septic issues. And when the restaurant was in there, there's a separate system for the restaurant that looks to me is in that close proximity.
Of parcel B?
Of parcel B. And I do recall a number of years ago when there was a structure on which would be parcel 6B. There was a house on that at one point, and the septic affluent from the Chinese restaurant went into that basement. And that was probably about 30 years ago. So that could very well be the intent for the parcels. But whatever it is, they're allowed to do that. They can keep them for whatever they need. But as this plan shows, they are not buildable.
As this plan shows.
Correct.
Which plan are you talking about, Alan?
The one that's in front of us, which is the latest.
2017.
Rebecca put it on there. Rebecca, you need to go up on the legend. That would be the 2017 plan. This is the latest. Yeah. The latest recorded plan, which eliminated the agreement that it was non-buildable. So it appears to me that there's a lot of different intents here, and they're reserving their rights to do other things in the area. Basically, that's what they're doing.
All right. Anybody else have any other comments, additions?
Just to catch me up to speed on this, Mr. Chairman, on the plan did not subdivide lot 6A, and that note we were talking about earlier, the agreed area of no build zone, it seems to be it's because of wetlands. If you read that entire note, am I reading that correctly?
It says wetland delineation plan of land located at Plymouth Street, Halifax, Mass. By Land Planning Inc. dated May 12, 2006 and revised 6/2/2006. 25,497 square feet. Agreed area of no build zone.
So has that gone away?
Well, it's gone away from being that plan that you're referring to right now as being recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and the plan that's right now in front of us on our computer screen, it's gone away. Yes.
Well, has anybody looked at the deed? Is it on the deed?
That's what Rebecca said. As far as she knew, it was not on the deed, and that's what she had just made mention not long ago, that she did not think it carried forward.
Yep. We're going to look into this and make sure we have a complete understanding of what that was for.
All right. So it's going to be looked into.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Well, anybody else have any other comments, additions, deletions, or anything else they'd like to add at this point? So the board. I'm looking on my agenda here for tonight's meeting to see if we had anything else that needed to be covered on January 13th, 2021. I think we covered everything that was on there. I'm sorry? Oh, I thought somebody commented. All right. Well, does anybody have anything else they want to add? I think I'd like to go through, and Amy, if you could help me along with this. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything for our next meeting. You know, the areas or topics that we're looking to, or and Rebecca and Alan and Joe and anybody else that would like to assist on this. Right now, I have for our next meeting, Rebecca was going to review the files from Conservation as well as the Planning Board, and the two plans. And Rebecca, do you have copies of them? Have they been forwarded to you? The two maps that we were discussing that were recorded at the Registry of Deeds that we were making reference to. Do you have them?
I have both of those plan books and pages. Yes, I have them both.
Okay, awesome. As long as you have them, so that that can be reviewed, Amy, and reviewed and determined what the status is, or in fact, if they're still active and still part of this whole determination. Number two was the septic system on the property. That was a big concern that we need to be addressed, as well as the stormwater runoff. That was the elevations and the possibility of the project somehow affecting the water and flood area of O'Reilly's, the O'Reilly property, which on the new map here is listed as Cumberland Farms. We certainly need that to be brought up to date also. The wetland line discrepancy, we're going to hopefully have Mr. Diaz and Conservation somehow determine and give us a determination as to whether or not where the actual wetlands buffer begins and ends, and somehow explain the 120, 130 feet difference between both plans that had been being referred to in the same year of 2018 and be off by 130 feet. I personally need an explanation to that. I don't know how to better word that, but
Right, the applicant was also going to give us information on that.
yes, the
So,
applicant.
yeah.
Rebecca, we're dumping this all on you, Rebecca. So,
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. The meeting's in like 6 months, right? Next meeting?
Next week.
really, well, that's what we need. The applicant does need to provide us with at least the correct. I don't want to say correct information. The most accurate. It's just way too out of line, Rebecca. There's no way we can
Absolutely.
possibly,
No
get
arguing.
that.
Let's figure it out.
So, Mr. Chairman, there was also the cost of realigning the intersection. Mr. Purcellin had asked for that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Paul.
It's really, Amy, it's really difficult to get that because we don't have and won't have any design of what needs to be done if the roadway was to be aligned or even offset. I mean, we can try to put together some educated guesstimates, but it's still going to be some kind of an estimate, and we'll try to do that if that's acceptable.
And you keep dropping the height.
Dude, what do you think, Amy? Are exact numbers or?
No, but I had heard from the traffic engineer, that there were $50,000 per pole, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure they can come up with something other than, what was it? I think it was 250,000 to 350,000. I mean, that's
right.
Seems to be a lot. I mean, I guess if there's 3 poles that need to be removed and they're each 50,000, an estimate of 50,000, I don't think anybody's going to hold them, to this exact number.
No, but we would. You're right. We would like to see some numbers on it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with that kind of an estimate. I mean, there again, it's a best guess estimate without a full design, but we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Where are we, Amy? The recorded plan.
The septic, we already discussed that. So we discussed the wetland line discrepancy, the septic system on one lot, the lot under site control, the basins and the infiltration and the elevation issue, the cost for realigning the intersection, and then the only other thing would be the plan, the recorded plan references, which Arlana had sent us an email during this hearing that had come in late today. So that might address all of that issue. Rebecca had sent something. I didn't get a chance to look at it because I was on this meeting, but we can
just
also.
so you know, the email. Yeah, the email addressed Joe's comment on the acreage. Why 8
that's so great.
Yep. Why 8.7 and 5 point. So that's what that email was.
Okay.
Just so you know.
So we can just all review that before the next meeting.
That would be great.
But that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
That's all.
Mr. Chairman, Alan Diaz.
Yes, sir.
If I can be heard, I'd like to have you add the question that I have on the drainage part where all the basins are on an easement and they go into that pond. Actually, who controls that pond? It appeared to be, when I say a pond, it seemed to be just a water hole. It didn't appear to be any other outlets. So that to me is a little concerning. We don't know who is going to own that, what controls that the applicant is going to have over that in the event that we have 1 or 2 or 3 100-year rains. I think that's important that your board should know that when these basins do fill up, where that effluent is going to go.
That was specifically, wasn't it, Alan, that you had stated the design of the system itself, you were very much in approval of. It's just that to the pond, who controls the pond, if I understand it correctly?
Right. I think they did a very good job. They got a very large amount of basins, and they did that because the basins aren't going to infiltrate into the ground. The only way that water is going to go anywhere is through evaporation. And those are quite large. I don't know how much volume they hold, but in the event that they do fill up, typically drainage will go into a wetlands area, or they're in-ground infiltration points. And then if it does fill up, they'll run on top of the ground. In this particular case, we're going into a pond on an adjacent property with no controls. I think someone needs to be able to determine what's going to happen when it's a matter of when we have that event. We've gotten awful rains in the last few years, so I don't know what Rebecca agrees or disagrees, but if that's the last point that water is going to go, and it's not into a wetlands area that's going to absorb into the ground, who controls it?
All right. Charlie, could you unmute Pat Brennan, please?
Yeah, sure. Well,
Thank you.
I can do it. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, I had a letter that I sent to the board in May of last year where I had a number of concerns about the drainage design. The revised information that had been submitted that I sent a letter on about last week didn't address any of those drainage concerns. The response was that they were going to hold off on doing any revisions in the drainage until they get a little further along. So that whole drainage system still needs a full review, which I haven't been able to do because I haven't revised the plans based on my initial comments. In the location of the actual location of the wetlands, where they end up being, could have major impacts on that drainage design because the basins, some of the basins are, according to the O'Reilly plan, are smack dab in the middle of the wetlands. So I think the wetland line is the most important. And then, like I said, I have a lot of outstanding drainage issues that they've yet to address.
All right, then we'll put that on the list, Pat, that even if we have to, resend out your email with the, drainage designs, the concerns that you had on it. Like you said, when the new plan was submitted, it changes everything, and we need to be updated on that. So, Amy, I guess that would be the 11th one added on to the list for our next meeting.
Bert?
Yes.
I did get a message from Thomas Alger. I don't know if he has a microphone available, but he did write a note saying, I would like to see the plans revised to show the agreed upon drainage on the Alger property. The plans do not reflect the agreed upon drainage.
Okay, well, I certainly, I think that, Rebecca, if you could add that on to number 11 there too, which is what Mr. Brennan had just said, stating the drainage designs based on the new plan or the revised plan that we had just seen tonight at tonight's meeting. It would be helpful, and include the Alger property if it extended. Yep. It's going to extend over to the Halifax, country club property there. So the Algers is right there in front of it to see if anything would be affected. So it would, what the drainage will affect on O'Reilly's, and then what the drainage would affect on the Alger property.
After I figure out where the wetlands are.
All of the above.
Got it.
All right. Anybody need me to read through the 11 again, or we pretty much got them all down? Paul, you all set with what we're going to need, what we'd like to see?
Yes, I have a good understanding, and we'll be talking to Rebecca and so forth. We'll be trying to figure it out, but it's mostly Rebecca's work, but we'll be discussing, and I understand.
Excellent. And Rebecca, any questions or anything like that, please feel free to give a call, and we'll
excellent.
For finances for you, or put you in touch with someone that can, so at least have this, all for our next meeting, hopefully, in 2 days.
Oh, you're funny. We'll knock some of these off at the next meeting. I'm not sure about all of them, but we'll get the important ones done.
Okay, I just wanted to see your face when I said that. That's all.
Yeah, okay. As my cat has the zoomies over here, he's like scaring the...
All right then, unless anybody has anything else, any other comments or anything? Everybody good?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I lost connection. I missed, are you continuing this to a date certain?
We do have to do that. We do
Oh,
have to.
okay. So I didn't miss that. Okay. I just thought I missed the date.
You know something, mine did the same thing for whatever reason. My computer just shut down and I didn't have to reboot, but what have we been doing, Charlie?
Well, if you were doing the second
Wednesday,
Tuesday, it would be February 10th.
And I am not available on February 10th.
So the one after that's the 17th, or you go with the 3rd, but it sounds like people have their work cut out for them. I don't know whether you want to go with a 3-week or a 5-week.
Rebecca, what's your availability in February?
Oh,
Me?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rebecca, you said you weren't available.
No, I'm not available.
Amy's not available.
Oh, okay. I didn't know who that was. Sorry.
Uh,
Amy, what's your schedule?
The 17th or the 24th. If you want to do a Wednesday night, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know. I think Rebecca has said that she would try to get as much done as she could by the next meeting. I say the more time, the better. I would.
I mean, I do too, but it is what it is. So just pick a date and.
How about the 24th? Why don't we go to the 24th?
The board, if the board could tell Bert if you're available on February 24th, please.
Yep.
Okay, gentlemen.
Fine,
Peter?
sure. Yep.
Peter, you good?
I'm good.
Jerry?
I'm good.
Where am I?
I'm good, Bert.
Bob, you're good?
I'm good.
Dan?
Yes.
Keziah?
Yes.
And myself. All right, so why don't
And we
we,
would, Mr. Chairman, we will need Alan if possible.
Yes, I'll be available.
all right, I'll accept a motion then to continue the hearing on the Country Club Estates for February 24th at 7 p.m.
I'll make a motion to continue the Country Club Estates to February 24th at 7 p.m.
Second.
By Zoom, and I have a second. I'm going to ask for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Keziah?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Pete, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And who did I miss? Oh, Jerry, did I get you?
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right, we'll continue this hearing then, continue to February 24th at 7 p.m. Everybody, thank you so very much. I know this is long and tedious, but I appreciate it. Joe, thank you. Pat, thank you. Rebecca, and everybody. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, folks.